Ooh.
Oh, that's good. It's looking good. Right. OK, so welcome, everybody, and apologies for the slightly delayed start. We've still got a few people arriving, and poor old Emily's been stuck on a train anyway. So, as I said, I'm Beverley.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. These things happen. That's the joy of doing these things live. So I'm Beverley. I'm also known as the data protection lady. And I've worked in the data protection field for coming up for 24 years now. Emily, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction?
Okay, so yes, I'm Emily Overton. I am known as Records Management Girl in the industry. I'm heading on 20 years, I think it is, in the field, but it just makes me feel really old. I'm basically fundamentally a very sad person because I started chattering about records management when it was Twitter, and I was pretty much the only one that was shouting about it, saying, you know, you can't do data protection without doing records management because you need to know what you've got, why you've got it, and how long you keep it. And those are the three fundamentals of records management, not data protection. But I've yet to have anybody argue with me that I'm wrong if you don't have good records management, that you can do data protection. So if you want to challenge me, go ahead.
And I was just saying before you joined us, Emily, there's the diversity of roles that we've got on the call today. And there's quite a few people who have that mix of both. They're the DPO and the records manager. So it was interesting to see those coming into play. That's quite a challenge, I think, to be both, to be perfectly honest. I've got a few questions I'd like to ask you. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. So I've worked in organisations, large and small, and not all of them have a records manager or somebody responsible for records management. So why is it, as you say, why is it fundamental that organisations should have a strategy to manage their records? What are the benefits of getting it right?
Oh my gosh, you really are putting me on the spot. I tried thinking about answers because you did warn me about the questions, but trying to come up with an answer to that, because it's an essay in itself. You know, people will write about this as a university dissertation. It's that long, you know. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying about knowing what you've got, why you've got it, and how long you need to keep it. And then there's I call it 5 bums on a goalpost, which is basically the what, the where, the when, the why, the who, and the how. And having contemporaneous records, because the amount of people who come up with litigation or with issues in the future with their records is because they're missing certain detail. So if you cut out either the what or the who, some records just no longer make sense. So with data protection in itself, if you don't know what you've got or why you've got it, so your processing condition, or you know, sort of like how long you need to keep it, you've got your storage limitation there. It really does beg to wonder, well, how can you do data protection, you know? So having a good, clear records management strategy on how you're going to go manage those records is really important, because, you know, sort of like if it's in a disarray and a mess, when people put in, say, subject access requests, you ooh, sorry.
It's all right. It's somebody just arriving.
Oh, okay. When you when you get, say, a subject access request in and you need to access their records, if you don't know where they are, or they're all over the shop, how on earth are you going to answer that in 30 days? It was hard enough when it was 40. And now it's a considerable less amount. So I just don't, I sit here and I just don't know how organisations are confidently on their risk register managing their information.
And I think you picked up You picked up a really good point there, Emily, about it being on organisations' risk registers. You know, if your records management, if you don't have a records management strategy, then you are running a risk, and it should be on your risk register. Something that I often get asked, and you might do as well, especially with perhaps smaller charities, is where can we find any guidance? How long do we keep stuff for? Whether it's personal data or whether it's corporate records, is there any guidance out there people can draw upon?
Well, there's multiple sources, but the main thing that I always try to communicate with people is that you can't carbon copy someone else's retention schedule. So I come across, say, NHS organisations who there's a NHS code of practice for records management, and they have downloaded the entire schedule in itself and just carbon copied it and put it into one of their policy documents. And say if you have a mental health trust that doesn't have A&E or maternity, why on earth have you got A&E and maternity records on your schedule? Like, you don't put, I mean, it even goes down to, I slated the ICO's retention schedule, and there was a few people there that weren't happy with me because they had stuff on their retention schedule that just didn't make sense. On my blog, I've got a whole review on it. So I regularly put out records management advice and stories and info on my blog. So it's worthwhile considering that you might want to have a read of it. If people are interested in subscribing to my newsletter, then they can just email me on emily@rmgirl.co.uk with subscribe in the subject title. And once I've managed to fix my newsletter mail shot, which is a little bit broken at the minute, then I'll be sending out stuff out about records management in the news and stuff that I've written recently, whether it be on my blog or for other companies, because I do a lot of content writing. So in terms of where do we get advice, first stop is my blog. But secondly is that there's a professional society called the Information and Records Management Society.
Yes, very good.
And it is, well, it's just had its 40-year anniversary. And you have basically a community of people. And I'm one of their group chairs for their information rights group. So twice a year, I do face-to-face meetings. And I have a theme on the day, and I get 4, 5, 6 different speakers, or the last one I just did speed networking. So imagine speed dating, but for networking. And every 3 minutes, each of the delegates had to get up and go and speak to someone else. It was madness, but it was really good fun. So it's not about recreating a wheel, it's about using those resources that are out there and finding out from networking with people. The amount of, I learn something new every day in the industry. It's like I'm never going to say that I've stopped finding stuff out, because there's new people coming into the industry with better and bigger ideas, and I'm a bit long in the tooth now. So I always like to learn from others. So if you'd like to go to those meetings, I also list them in my newsletter as well. But if you look up IRMS, it's irms.org.uk, and it has so many benefits, including a six times a year bulletin, so a physical magazine that gets delivered to you with multiple different types of writing up and info, etc. in it. And I thoroughly recommend you sign up to be a member. I believe it's just under 100 quid for the entire year, but that gives you access to 30 plus meetings a year, 6 bulletins, discounts, a online forum, and so many things. So that's something that I could just keep talking about records management. Sorry, I can see you wanted to talk.
That's okay. I've used the IRMS guidance before, because what I found, especially with charities, that they're sometimes at a loss as to where to get the guidance. And I know the IRMS does a really good one focused on charities that you can use as a baseline, can't you?
Yeah, so there's a third sector retention schedule toolkit that you can access. And so that's a good start. But like I say, is that you can't just carbon copy it. You have to think
No, I agree.
Apply to your organisation. But you then, once you've got that, if the one thing I say about retention is that there is obviously a limitation, a retention for by law how long you keep something. But if you want to keep it longer, as long as you have a business reason to keep something, and it's not just because I can't be bothered or I haven't got the time to look at my records, as long as it's we've got lots to learn from this, you have the opportunity to keep retention of records a lot longer than just by law. There's very few retention periods that are maximum. They're usually very much a minimum line in the sand. We're not going to even consider reviewing and getting rid of this stuff until we're satisfied that we've met our legal requirements. But then also consider your risk values. Like, records management is all about risk. If you understand risk, you're going to find records management pretty easy. It's a lot of it is it's not rocket science. It's generally thinking about the importance of information and data in your organisation and the risk that it carries. Because after your HR/people, your next most valuable asset is your records. And so if you've got risk register to do with your people, why on earth haven't you got your information risk on the same register?
I totally agree. Can we perhaps touch on something that I've been asked a few times, and that's about how can we help automate records management? A lot of organizations use SharePoint and Microsoft products. That's the one I'm most familiar with, but those sort of products require you to have considered the classification of your records when you create them. Have you come across any other sort of platforms that help you automate records management?
To be honest, like when you're working on automation, you are adding another level of risk to what you're doing. If things are being deleted automatically, for example, how do you know that you definitely wanted to get rid of that document until it's too late? I'm not a massive fan of automation, and that's a huge but, there are certain things that you can do. So one, as a tip for the delegates today, is that when you're considering retention of your email, you should be retaining your sent items, not your inbox. Your inbox is from someone else's sent items. So if you manage the records that you created, then those are the things that you have the need to look after the retention, not the stuff that comes in. So when it comes to automation of deletion of emails in people's inboxes, say like they did with the MPs' inboxes, they get rid of them. If it hasn't been moved online somewhere, they get rid of those emails after 90 days because they don't need them anymore. But the sent items is the more important one for you. So, this generally tends to blow a lot of people's minds because they never think about sent items being just as important as an inbox.
And I tend to sort of recommend to people as well, if it's a really important email, like it's a decision-making email, someone's approving the doing of something, don't just leave it in Outlook. Put it into your SharePoint records as well, because your SharePoint records are probably going to be there long after Outlook.
I would say that if I held up my hand, the question that I get asked the most often, so the top 5 questions that I get asked, one of them is, how long do we retain email for? And I say to people, the retention isn't based on the format, it's based on the content. So you need to be looking after each individual email based on its merit and its topic that it relates to. So if it's to do with gift aid, then you've got to make sure that you keep it for a certain amount of time. If it's about something health and safety related, you've got to consider that could be a much bigger retention period, like 75 years, for example, if it's to do with asbestos. You know, there's like, you can't just go, right, okay, the emails that I've got, just because they're email, that they have a retention.
What about where organisations are using platforms like Teams messaging and things like that? Are you seeing sort of questions arising in relation to Teams messages?
Well, the one thing you need to consider is actually what is Teams doing for your organisation? Is it fundamentally a chat? You know, walking up to it's the equivalent of it's a digital version of walking up to someone's desk and saying, "Bev, have you got a copy of whatever?" And you go, "Yes, no problem. Here it is." You don't need to retain those kind of chats. It's the digital version of just walking up to someone's desk. So actually, is it redundant? It's what I like to call ROT information: redundant, obsolete, and transient information. So it's the leaves that clutter up the drain. So actually, do you need to worry about Teams if it's just chat functions? Admittedly, there are the exceptions to the rule. For example, if someone was being bullied via Teams, and the retention of those for investigation purposes. But on the whole, I hold very little value to a Teams chat.
I've certainly seen Teams messages. I know it's changing the subject a little bit, but when someone's put in a subject access request, they've asked for copies of Teams messages or they've asked for Teams messages to be searched because they believe they're being discussed by other people in the chat. So it's an interesting how they start to come into scope for things like that as well.
Yeah, this is why I say it depends on what Teams does for you. You have to take Teams in a fragmented way, dependent on what it actually does. I think we just had a question.
Yes, I was just going to have a quick look. Right, so it's from Stella, and she says, in relation to emails and retention, would this be stored in an appropriate system or area and not Outlook though? So retaining of the actual email should be less. Outlook shouldn't be used as a storage facility in these instances. I must admit, I always say Outlook isn't a storage facility. It's because if someone leaves and their Outlook account gets deleted, those emails are gone from their account.
There is functionality. Say if you're using SharePoint, there's software that, say for instance, just as an example, harmon.ie is so it says Harmony, but it's harmon.ie, is that it sits in your Outlook, and it basically is your SharePoint folder structure in the bottom of your Outlook. So you're able to drag and drop emails directly into your SharePoint using this additional software.
That I did not know that. That's a really good tool, I think, because I didn't know that existed. And I have been one of these people who have been dragging across, trying to have SharePoint open at the same time as Outlook and dragging emails into SharePoint. So that sounds a really good tool.
Well, one of the things that is the problem with Outlook is that, so the folder structures that you can do, where you can do storage on them, the saving capabilities of that is at best dodgy, because what they're called is .pst files, and .pst files are well known to basically corrupt. So quite often when somebody leaves the organisation, they will drag and drop the entire PST file and stick it on the drive. But that's a dangerous thing to be doing, because will you still have access to that PST file if it corrupts? Probably not. So people need to be managing their email in a much better way. I do actually have a quick guide on email. It's a 2-page piece of guidance that talks about email. It's not currently on my shop, but I could put it on my shop as something that people can get as advice on how to manage email.
Yeah, I think that might be worth it, because I'm learning new things here as well, and I thought I was pretty au fait with email retention, so I'm learning stuff, so I think that might be worth it, Emily. We're beginning to run out of time, but there is something that I've been asked just yesterday evening actually, and it was something I'd put. It is about the ethical aspects of records management, and I don't know if you're getting any questions about this, about where people are creating digital mountains of stuff, where their SharePoint or their folders or whatever Google, whatever platforms they're using, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then somebody was saying, well, but is there a climate change? Is there an ethical aspect to this? And I was thinking about it. And for me, if you think about these massive data centers that are emerging all over the planet now, they take a lot of water to cool them, so you can have, data isn't in the white fluffy thing above your head.
Well, you say that, but one of the things that really happens the most, reason why our data centers are getting larger and larger and larger, is because people aren't deleting and destroying stuff.
Exactly.
So records management works on what is called is a life cycle. So imagine a conveyor belt, and on that conveyor belt is 5 different boxes. So you've got creation, use, storage, review, and disposition. And then you've got a massive claw that comes down from the archives, because some of those records will be kept in an archive. But that all too often, the problem is that things get to storage, and that's where they stop. They don't carry on that conveyor belt. It just kind of like a spanner in the works means that people don't review and destroy stuff because either they're too scared to do it, or they don't know what they're doing. And that's where people like myself come in, because as a consultant, I'm able to hold people's hands and to kind of get rid of the complication of it all. It's that, yes, we are getting bigger data centers, but they only really have themselves to blame because they're not actually following the life cycle. So in terms of ethical, it's not records management that is to blame for an ethical
no, I agree.
need. It's about the fact that people are not applying the correct skill and tool to sort this problem out.
I totally agree. It's, if you want to help contribute to saving the planet, sort your records out.
Sorry, could you say that again?
I said I totally agree. If you want to help contribute to saving the planet, sort your records out.
Exactly. And also be making sure that if you've got physical records, that your confidential information that's being shredded can be recycled as well.
Good point.
So anything that's on a physical record, stop people from printing stuff. They don't need to print anything anymore. Stop using a fax machine. We're in 2024. And it's like the 90s called, it wants its fax back. Sort of like we don't need physical records like we used to have anymore. Sorry, I'm still in the train station, so
I can tell.
This isn't helpful, I'm really sorry.
It's all right. We're coming towards the close of the time anyway. I just wanted to thank you, Emily, for joining us today. I know it hasn't been the easiest of sessions for you. The next session, folks, is on the 16th of May, and that's just with me, and that's on cookies. So if you want a session on... Well, maybe a bit of both. I might have a chocolate cookie with me, but I'm doing a session on that's the way the cookie crumbles, and we'll be looking at how you should use cookies, the ethical side of using cookies as well. So if you want to join up to that one, just pop across to my website and register. I'm hoping we'll get a good crowd for that one as well. Thank you all for attending. If you've got any feedback on content or you've got any more questions, if you ping them across to me or Emily as the RM girl, you can find us both on LinkedIn, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, so people can find me rmgirl.co.uk. I'm very easy to track down. Just look for colour.
Lovely. Thank you so much then, folks. See you again soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.